Why do I keep doing this to myself? I mean, hello everyone. Welcome to another casual conversation with me, your friend Carlz, where I try to understand myself in Spanish, which sometimes is hard. Maybe it's easier for me to understand myself in English. I don't know. But when I say why do I do this to myself, I'm not talking about stuff. I love talking about stuff. When I say that, I'm referring to the Marvel Cinematic Universe. It has been a source of, well, now that I think about it, I don't know if I had more joy with it or just not disappointment, but like a strange, bizarre sensation out of a product that should bring you joy, but it just brings you like questions. So I mentioned during my, I think it was during my comic book show, how well, I'm talking about Wonder Man, by the way, the latest outing streaming series from Marvel. I mentioned like it is impossible for you to come into a product like this without the publicity behind it. And Wonder Man had like a publicity like what? When was the last time a Marvel series got that kind of attention? And I'm talking about critically acclaimed, like those quotes, and I'm pretty sure they used that quote before, like quote unquote, this is what Marvel television should be, or like this is Marvel at its best, or like this is basically the street definition of critically acclaimed. Wonder Man is a critically acclaimed show, which pushed it a little bit further in my view list, watch list, whatever. I usually just go for the Marvel stuff right away, with a couple of exceptions, like Loki season 2 or something like that, which I haven't seen yet, because I had enough with Loki season 1. It was that kind of like uninteresting, not interesting. But this one was highly praised, highly acclaimed, so I moved it forward. And I had like a revelation that I've had for the longest time with these Marvel products, and something that maybe it's me who works under the illusion that that kind of like prejudice can go away, and it is the fact that these shows, in more than one way, are not made for someone like me. And who is someone like me? Someone who expects these shows to feel like a comic book. This is something that none of these shows have like achieved for a long time, since the MCU project died after Avengers Endgame. I've talked about it a lot, about the immersion, about the idea of living under a universe, a shared universe. And by now, as I'm saying this, I do the mea culpa, as they say in Spanish, and I think in Italian as well, where like you sort of think about your own prejudices and shortcomings, and you go like, yeah, of course, I'm asking for something that you will never get out of this. You know, it's no spoiler to say that Wonder Man has the connection through the Mandarin, Ben Kingsley's character, whose name is Trevor in the show. That's it. That's the whole connection. But this creates a bunch of problems. Not necessarily from the perspective of someone that expects that as me, but in the show as well. So if we go straight into Wonder Man and we think about why it's so critically acclaimed, that is always the sort of paradox you get, right? You go into a show and it's quote unquote critically acclaimed, and you are expecting to see what critics are raving about. And then you realize, as I say, there are like basically three types of viewers or like three types of main groups of viewers of a Marvel show. The one that just watches as an isolated show, mostly I guess the critics. And second one is the people that have only watched and are fans of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And the third are like the ones that, like me, that read comics and have such, like, I mean, I gotta say, this is not the right expectation to have for this, okay? That's the whole point of it. It's not the right expectation to have from a show like this. To project comic books and intertwine stories and uh, greater universes, it's not the right thing to expect out of this. But anyways, you try to make do with everything you see and try to see this revelation of critically acclaimed content. And once you go through the whole series, which by the way is kind of hard to spoil, it's really basic series. It's quite basic. It doesn't hold too many surprises or anything. As a matter of fact, it doesn't hold weight for anything related to the Marvel Cinematic Universe, which is one of the weaknesses that I always see. It's like, you wonder any of these products that belong to the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and you ask the question, does anything change with it in it, or without it in it? Does anything change? And if you take out or take in Wonder Man, nothing changes. Nothing. Like the redemption arc for the character of Trevor, a character that I've hated for like, well, I don't remember when Iron Man 3 came out, for more than 10 years for sure. Character that I've hated for 10 years. But anyways, let's go back to what I was saying. What is the critically acclaimed part of it? What is it? And here's a curious thing about Wonder Man. Truth is, it's not about MCU. It's not even about superheroes. It's just a drama about actors. And under that kind of like description, it is a great fucking show. But then you get, as I said, into this paradoxical position. It's like, is that enough? Is people just, or are people just letting the show go? Like, let's not ask for fantasy and superheroism in it. Let's just watch it like that. And I get into this conundrum of like, okay, this is a really good drama about actors, but isn't it supposed to be a superheroes? Isn't it supposed to be about the Marvel universe? What elements of the universe are implicit or explicit in Wonder Man? Like in the first episode, this is no spoiler, you see he goes to one of those studios where they record stuff, and you see a big poster of the Rogers the musical. I don't remember in which MCU product they had that, but they did like a musical show based on Captain America, so you had that reference. And these Marvel shows, they get like a pass with like the bare minimum reference to anything they done before. And it's like, oh, let's mention the blip where like people blipped away, let's mention the Avengers, let's mention this. But it's been like more than 20 years and you never get any sort of satisfaction out of it. Perhaps the last time something like that felt relevant was Loki season 1, when they obviously tried to make the show into the main storyline, or as part of the main storyline they were building, even though with the whole Jonathan Majors scandal and anything, I don't know, all of that was scrapped, I guess. But they tried to. But then, sorry. Then again, in most of the other products, that is not the case. There's something that just doesn't happen. So we come into this conundrum, and we ask whether we should see it that way or not. We ask ourselves whether we should see like that or not. And sadly, for me, for a person like me, impossible. And it's ironic because you enjoy Wonder Man. It's fun, it's fast paced, it's not too long, and of course the main thing is the performances of Yaya and Ben Kingsley, right? It's their performances that make the show good because, and here's the point, because that's all the show is. That is all the show is. You could change Simon, the character of Wonder Man. You can change his condition, which in the series is having quote unquote superpowers. Like you can change that condition to anything else and have the same backstory, the same drama, and have the same situations, exactly the same. And change superhero for something else, some other secret. You can change it for anything, and it will work regardless. So I guess what triggers me is that when critics says this is what Marvel should do, this is what Marvel should be, and I'm like, no, because Marvel is not a drama producing company. They're not gonna. They're not aiming to do the next. I don't know any acting shows, but they're not aiming to do the next big drama or the next studio. I mean, exploration on actor sensitivity on mentality. They're not aiming for that. I guess the phrase should be, "This is the level of professionalism," or like this is the level of good writing that Marvel should have. But that is not what Marvel should be. Marvel should be more about fantasy and more about this great big world of superheroes, and this has nothing to do with superheroes. I'm gonna be even more categorical. Like, it doesn't have anything to do with superheroes. You can change, as I said, the drama with other stuff. I don't know, drugs, gender identity, racial bias. Like, you can change it with so many things, and the show will be the same thing. Then you go and wonder, okay, like if you have a comic book mentality, how could you possibly understand a product like this under the pretense of something that is never going to achieve? During my Spanish episode, I kept reflecting about new characters in the Marvel universe in comic book form, and how much for granted we take the fact that a new character coming into the comic books already has a universe, a full-grown exponential universe full of references and stuff to play in. Like, basically, these live action shows are in on a disadvantage. They are on a great disadvantage. And you think, how far away can a character be in the comic books? Right? How separated it can be from the main thing, or can they at all? Like, any big character in the comic books in the last 20 years, like breakthrough characters, they are always related to something. So in my Spanish episode, I mentioned Miss Marvel, one of my favorite characters of the last 20 years, easy. But she's related to so many things. But they just brought the new stuff. They put her in Jersey. She's from a different religion. She's like culturally charged as a Muslim hero. Like, she has so many elements. But like, fuck, Wolverine is gonna appear. Of course, Carol Danvers is gonna appear. You know, like, she lives in Jersey, but like, she can go to New York regardless. And like, there is no storyline in comic book form that doesn't have the potential to be so much more things. And that is something that you will never ever achieve in live action. And it's a ghost that haunts people like me, because we crave that. And as I said before, it's not only a paradox, but it's it's something that um, we need to learn to turn off somehow, which in my case is impossible. It's impossible. Like, I wish somebody could teach me how to do that. I guess one of the the possibilities is, like, as I said, Wonder Man is a great show about actors. Like, hold on to that. Hold on to that and ignore the rest. But how can you? And here's the tricky part. Even if Wonder Man is about actors, and that is the main focus of the series, its strength and the source of all of its enjoyment, it's not like Marvel will not play with the element of them appearing someplace else. They are the ones that keep the myth going of their interconnected universe that basically, as I said, it failed. They asked Jaya on interviews, like, will you be on Doomsday? And he just laughed, and of course he can't say anything. I'm pretty sure he wasn't part of those 300 chairs or something in the Avengers Doomsday cast reveal. I'm pretty sure he wasn't in there. But even that could be manipulated. One thing that I stand by, one idea that I got from my Spanish episode, is that I'm pretty sure they have like a conditional sort of fact. How can you call it? Basically, Doomsday is coming up, and I'm pretty sure they have a script flexible enough to add cameos from characters depending on their popularity. What I'm saying is, like, now with the success of Wonder Man, they probably can snuck Simon in. And here's where the paradox keeps making it so it's impossible for me to keep acknowledging it, or making it harder for me to separate the whole thing, or like stop thinking like with a comic book mentality. You know, if they somehow bring Simon Williams into this, if they do it, it would feel weird as fuck. This is a spoiler-free episode, so I'm not gonna say how it ends. I already said that personally, I don't think there's much to spoil because it's a character-based show. It's all about them, their reactions, their feelings, but it doesn't end in a way that makes it like, okay, we go from here to Avengers Doomsday. You know, it's not like that. So if he was to appear in Avengers Doomsday, it would feel so strange. It would feel so weird. And that's why one of the reasons you go like, how can I disconnect my comic book mentality from these shows? They keep pulling you in. You know, that's the main basis of the paradox. Can you disconnect yourself? Perhaps you can, but they keep pulling you into the same idea or concept. I also reflected on like comic books from famous characters that get a chance of to like stand on their own, be unique for like a short story or like a one volume, and having like a sort of like a minimal disconnection from the universe to do something special. In Marvel case, probably the most like noteworthy mention for the past like decade was Tom King's Vision. During that comic book, the Vision had like which it's the basis for WandaVision as well. It's pretty much the same. I mean, except for the whole spoiler, WandaVision spoiler. Besides the whole made-up world, it has the same vibe. But anyways, I'm not gonna spoil Tom King's Vision. But in that comic book, the Vision had a chance to have his own dramatic story, quite a big one as well, and be almost non-interrupted by the overall Marvel universe. And the thing is, every character in Marvel in the comics, when they go through something like that, it always lingers. It always exists beyond those products. You know, if you see the Vision right now, who is a member of the Avengers currently in the comic books, he might not be mentioning every number like, hey, you guys remember what I did in my solo book? No, but he has the sequels of it. The sequels, can you call it like the something that happens because you experienced something before? Yeah, it could be a sequel, something that is like a remnant of your previous life experiences. In the Vision's case, is his daughter Vision, which is the most vivid, lingering, no pun intended, lingering effect of that run. The Vision having a daughter, and that came into play during the recent The Vision and the Scarlet Witch short volume they had, just like a last year, like by the end of the last year. You know, the Vision had a moment, and out came his previous trauma from the book and from his daughter. So all of this comic book segue is just to talk about how a comic book mentality works when you're watching these shows, and trying to make the point on how, to me, is completely impossible to detach from that mentality. Now, does that ultimately mean that Wonder Man is a bad show? And that's another side of the paradox. It's like, can you say, like, honestly and without any guilt, and kind of like, I don't know, can you justify an argument that Wonder Man is a bad show from any other place than this, that it doesn't feel like a comic book show? Can you justify it by any other argument other than that? And I gotta say the answer is no. I can't. This argument of Wonder Man not feeling like a comic book show because all of these comic book parameters are never met on these shows nowadays. As I said, since the failure of the MCU after Avengers Endgame, that can be used against him. I think that is my big revelation. Even if I can't disconnect from that train of thought of comic book mentality, I gotta accept that I can't use that argument against these shows anymore. You know, I can't. I like to say these feel like a comic book show, but the whole point of the state of affairs we are in right now, we live in a world where the superhero genre is a genre on itself. These are no longer based on comic books. You know, these are no longer comic book shows. These are superhero shows. And the genre of superhero show, it's its own creature by now. These shows and these movies are not comic book movies, are not comic book based movies. You could even go further and say they have nothing to do with comic books anymore. You know, and for someone that, like me, that still consumes so much Marvel and loves so much Marvel, I read Marvel every week. Is like the world my brain lives in, even more so than the real world sometimes. You know, when they talk about escapism, I already escaped mentally to the comic book universe like years ago. So that might be the biggest revelation. It's not a revelation, it's something you already know, but that a good superhero show keeps reminding you steadily one time after the other. Superhero shows and superhero movies. They keep reminding you of that fact that these are no longer comic book inspired, comic book based. These are superhero shows and movies, their own genre with their own standards and their own, how can you say, parameters. Like, you can't demand this shit anymore. And if you think, for example, in another recent superhero good stuff like Superman, James Gunn's Superman, like, can you do the same for Superman that I'm doing with Wonder Man? Like having this big comic book mentality. I'm not meaning to be offensive, but clearly James Gunn loves comic book way more than the creators of Wonder Man did or do. You know, James Gunn intentionally made it so that Superman was a world building movie event. And he did this thing that he I haven't seen Peacemaker, but all I know is that he already began putting Lex Luthor in Peacemaker, and that's a big deal. What's coming up next from DC though? Peacemaker. Well, I have no idea. Wow. Supergirl maybe, but that movie's coming up. Well, whatever the case, you know, it's another type of mentality. Let's make a superhero movie with a comic book vibe, and I think that's the appropriate way of thinking about it. A separate genre with vibes alongside to it. The whole interconnected universe thing in these movies, not only in superhero movies, but in, like, I don't know, the Harry Potter thing and all of these interconnected movies. They always live on subtlety. They always live in little nods. They always live in mentions, cameos, and everything. And that is the most you can expect out of it. You know. But anyways, once you achieve that, that was a big segue. I just wanted to make my point clear. Once you achieve that, seeing this series as its own superhero genre under the superhero genre for shows and movies, Wonder Man is a great series. It's a great series because it does one thing and one thing only, which is really good, and it's giving these characters like texture, humanity, layers. And this is something that you can admire even being a comic book fan. Part of me wanted like Marvel to do 8 episode introductory miniseries to all their new characters. It wouldn't be that bad of a thing because Wonder Man focuses most of its attention for the main character in building his character, no pun intended, which means that once the credits roll in the last episode of Wonder Man, you have a fully formed, ready to serve, like cooked evenly character to play with. You begin with a character that is like not no one, but you begin with a character that is in no state to do anything else but being an actor, and you end up with a character in a state with possibilities to be so much more inside your own universe. Even though, even though from a comic books perspective, this condition, this character doesn't feel relevant because, as I've been saying, they don't achieve the same level of immersion as comic books. But from a superhero genre point of view, you have a fully formed character to do something fun or entertaining. Ironically, not for Avengers or not for something of that high level. Like, no. In fact, that is one of the things that is curious to me. Like, why would people in interviews ask the actors now, when will you be in another thing from Marvel? Like, honestly though, the series is so like self-contained that I don't see them, and I don't feel the need to see them in something else other than like a possible season two. But like, what would be season two? What would it be about? It's a curious thing to think about. As I said, no spoilers, but it ends up in a situation with potential, but with like a bunch of question marks. Potential for what? You can't go from season one character study on actors to like a possible a probable season two out of like only superheroism and like big bad nemesis and I don't know explosions. It would make no sense, and I bet you critics would pan a season two Wonder Man fully fledged superhero thing. Like, yeah, I'm Wonder Man, I'm a hero, this is a villain, and this is about me fighting this villain. No, they will hate that shit. They would hate that shit. Which makes you wonder, like, haha, no pun intended, again, like, what is the strength of a series like that if it's gonna end up in like a whoa, what can we do with this character now? It's so funny. If it was a comic book, if it was a comic book, they would have a whole universe to play in, which is basically what Wonder Man has done in the comics. Wonder Man in the comics, it's been a, like a B C tier hero for the longest time. He's not popular. Actually, that's the main reason why we had a Wonder Man show, because he's a safe bait character, and we can already see as spectators, as viewers, we can already see how the cogs of production work in the case of Marvel. It's like you want to do something different, you want to do something creative. Here, have a B, C, D tier character. You can't fuck it up. You know, that's what happens with Guardians of the Galaxy. It's like, yeah, we have some random ass horror movie director. Sorry. We have a random ass movie director. Give him some D tier characters. Here are some Guardians of the Galaxy. Do something, and we already see how it works. They release a movie, blockbuster movie, and all of these characters become popular, and they come back to the comics, and they're like, Wonder Man was like that. Wonder Man has been a character that appears sporadically and randomly in mostly Avengers books for the last like 15 years. And of course, in the comics, he's also an actor, and like he has pretty similar characteristics to the one in the show. But is he relevant? Is he important in the comic? Does he do big stuff? Like, no, for the longest time. He's not like a main Avengers cast. Like, the last time he appeared was in the last run of West Coast Avenger from last year, and he wasn't even like a big part of the Avengers in that book. He was just there. So we know how these things work. We're gonna give you a D tier character so you can do your conceptual actor drama. So you see, the whole point of it is like, or the only possible conclusion you can get is that it's it's just its own thing. And I go back all the way to the beginning of the episode to that critic quote: "This is what Marvel should be," or "This is the best show Marvel has done in years." That has had to be understood under these new, as I said, standards, or like concepts, pre-concepts, pre preconceived preconceived notions of being under this superhero genre, and being this I don't want to say it doesn't have potential, but this self-contained story that is barely about superheroes, it's just about actors. But anyways, closing today's conversation, we get into a couple of conclusions. One is that the comic book brain will never be satisfied with the superhero genre. We always see it as a minor thing, not in a like pejorative way. I don't see this like, oh, comic book rules and these suck. No, it's just a sort of like kind of like an incompatibility in mentality and expectations. The right thing is to leave your expectations out of the door and really see these things for what they are, a completely different genre in a completely different medium. We gotta start understanding and separating further the concept of comic book inspired and comic book adaptation. Like, these are not comic book adaptations anymore, these are mostly inspired by. This is at best mostly inspired, but we are almost at the point where you just need to recognize the source material so you won't get sued. We are almost at that point. That is one conclusion. The other one is that Wonder Man is a great series because it does something really specific for a short moment of time, which is doing a character based almost theater play. Like, this is one of those things that it would be perfect in a theater play, because this is just two characters. I shit you not, there are no other characters. The other like characters that are like almost there, they're just utilitarian characters. The agent, the family, the authority, they are token characters. This is only about Simon and Trevor. That's it. So it could easily be a stage play. And under that context, Wonder Man is a great series because the actors are awesome, the leads are incredible, and their performances are super believable. It's special not to the development of Wonder Man, Simon Williams, and the character, how it's so hateable at some point, how he can be such an asshole, how can, it's a multi-layer performance from Yaya. It's amazing. And unlike almost any other hero in the Marvel universe, we're talking about MCU now exclusively, not comic books. Unlike almost any of them, not all of them get the luxury of having a personality or having this moment to be a person in a way which means that you can be good, you can be bad. It's not like he's gonna be a villain, but like he's a layered person with flaws. When people talk about superhero stuff and they talk about flawed characters like it's important, that's true. You don't take that for granted. It's hard to me to make a flawed but believable character in the superhero genre. It's hard. That's one of the good things about the new Avengers Thunderbolts movie as well, which wasn't as well received by as Wonder Man, I guess. I remember that the Thunderbolts had a great reception with critics, but like it just faded away into inexistence maybe. But that's another good example of making flawed characters. And I don't know, I guess ultimately what we need, and now going back to the comic book consumer thing, what we need of these shows and why Wonder Man is so good, we need from these shows what we cannot get from the book, which is a human face expression and a human performance. I guess if I'm not gonna expect these shows to be an immersive world of fantasy like the comic books, at the very least I'm gonna demand out of them the human side of it, the human element, the face, the face, the human face, the empathy that only looking at a real meaty human face can create. That level of empathy and drama. So if I'm capable of disconnecting my comic book brain, it's gonna be for that. It's gonna be for a face, for an expression that comic books do achieve, but in a completely different layer. And talking about that would be another show, and it would be highly philosophical. Like, I don't know. Is the drawn face as expressive as the meat and flesh face? Is the drawn drama more or less than the scene drama? You know, we're not gonna get into that, but let's just summarize it in that I'm gonna keep going into these shows. I'm gonna keep consuming Marvel Cinematic Universe content as long as they give me that flesh and blood kind of like intensity that you get in comic books in a different manner. Let's put it like that. It's in a different manner. Let's just leave it at that. It's in a different manner. And that's basically it. Wonder Man is an amazing series. It has great, strong performances. You need to disconnect your superhero brain from it, or like your comic book brain from it, and you also need to disconnect your MCU brain from it and see it as a self-contained drama about actors. The performances will carry you through it because they are amazing and entertaining, and the curiosity and potential, even though it's not as big as in comic books, it's still there, and it will feed your curiosity as an MCU enjoyer, and anyone who's interested in the superhero genre. It will feed your curiosity just enough to keep you interested for what comes next, if it comes next at all. But if it doesn't, this self-contained story, I think, is satisfactory for almost every range of consumer. The critical consumer, the MCU consumer, and the comic book consumer, if you have developed this capacity for dissociation that by now it seems an absolute must for anyone to have that enjoy comic books and wishes to enjoy these shows. That's it. I hope everyone has a wonderful, and I don't know, man. Like, I don't know. I don't wanna. Will we see Wonder Man in the fucking? I don't know, man. As I said before, and I'm saying it again, the only thing that those 200 shares means in the cast reveal for Doomsday is that these actors are gonna get hella paid for 5 minutes of screen time. Hella paid. 5 minutes? Hopefully. Will Jaja get 5 minutes on Doomsday? Perhaps not, but maybe in the second part. What's the second part? Doomsday Part 2? I don't fucking know. See you all for Daredevil Born Again Season 2. Because I'm gonna talk about it. Thank you for listening, and I already say have a wonderful, well, I'm gonna say it again, fuck it. I wish you all a wonderful day and week and year once again. Get wonderfully wished twice. Bye bye.